like to invite the speakers to come to the podium, and I hope that during the lunch break you had the opportunity to enjoy the exhibit. There is an art exhibition sponsored by the Permanent Mission of the Russian Federation and UNDESA, and there are photos and paintings contributed by a very talented woman who is not only a medical doctor but also an artist. Oh, thank you. Before starting the afternoon session, I would like to remind you all that when we talk about sport for development and peace, we are talking about sport for all people of all ages and of all abilities, as defined by the Kazan Action Plan of 2017. So we're not talking about sport in the traditional sense, soccer or tennis or golf or swimming, archery, etc., which are fascinating, but we're also talking about sport which is more casual. You walk in the street, you see something, you start playing with it. That is also physical activity, expressing ourselves with physical activities. Can be dance, it can be games. I think of the indigenous games. So it's a much more wider definition of sport that we would like to embrace today. And therefore, because of this, since the sport is also dance, I would like to introduce you an amazing group of dancers that is coming from Korea. Allow me one moment, because I would really like to call them with the exact title of their group, which is somewhere here. I apologize. Too many papers, I guess. Yes. We have the musical performance by the Milayal Performance Group, as well as the dance performance, which is organized by the International Disability Association. And these artists, sport, therefore, as I said, are coming from Korea. This association is collaborating with many other civil society organizations in more than 20 countries. And for today's event, the association organized a performance, as I said, by the Milal Performance Group, which is comprised of young adults with developmental disabilities and their volunteers. So they will be performing Samulnori, which is a Korean traditional percussion quartet, and also pen dance. Thank you. Every time I hear drums, I feel energized. I would like to dance. I don't know what about you. So I think that this actually gave some additional energy to the dancers that we're going to see performing right now. Thank you. so graceful, like butterflies, and in perfect sync, and in such a small space. They made an amazing performance. What a beautiful way of starting the afternoon and celebrate the 3rd of December, International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and show how with the physical movement, actually, we can bring messages so far, far, far away from New York and back to New York here. And I really want to pay my to congratulate with the teams, the trainers, and the Republic of Korea for having brought them here. I imagine that the efforts and also the expenses that had to be taken care of, it was enormous. Thank you so much. I would like now to start moving towards into the heart of the panel of today, sport for all, for development and peace. And as we know, the preamble of the 2030 Agenda, decided by 193 countries with 17 goals to be achieved by the year 2030, that's why it's called the 2030 Agenda. In the preamble of the 2030 Agenda, it is said that sport is an enabler of development and peace. And this message was consolidated by the Secretary General report of last year, strengthening the global framework for leveraging sport for development and peace. And then we had also another resolution, sport as an enabler of sustainable development. But I want to repeat once again, sport for us is as defined by the Kazan Action Plan of 2017. It comprises a sport for all, physical activity, recreation, dance, organized, casual, competitive, traditional sport, and indigenous sports and games as well in their diverse forms. So to be really, really inclusive. And sport, as defined right now, as I said, keep in mind the definition of the Kazan Action Plan, is a powerful tool to promote multilateralism. Countries talk to each other, even when they might have tensions, but then when it comes to sport, as defined right now, sport can be a unifier. Sport can really bring words of peace around, particularly if it is a friendly competition. If we talk about friendly competitions, although antagonism, as per the traditional kind of sport, is very important, as long as it enables people to engage in dialogues, not in tensions, and as long as it helps to prevent conflicts, it's really welcome. Now, when it comes to the Article 30 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, this article focuses on sport and recreational activities. In June this year, we dedicated a high-level panel discussion during the session of the Conference of the State Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities on sport, and how sport has the power to change perceptions, prejudices, and behavior. And it is also a very powerful tool to strengthen social ties, networks, but also has an impact in the economic and environmental dimension besides cultural and political. So, though persons with disabilities still unfortunately tend to be somehow excluded or marginalized from sport in its different forms, we have noticed that there is an increased support in terms of policy interventions globally. And thanks to this, accessibility and inclusion is improving thanks to sport opportunities for persons with disabilities, for persons without disabilities. As you know, we shouldn't think only of sport and development and peace, but what can be achieved through sport. Through sport, infrastructures have to be accessible and inclusive, and we can achieve that through sport. Through sport, we can promote education. Through sport. Through sport, we can produce amazing technological devices, and we will see what I'm talking about in a moment, through sport. So through sport, we can touch so many different things and therefore develop all the dimensions of life of a human being and of a community and of a country, and by doing that also bring peace. Now, I spoke a little bit too much, but I'm really passionate about this topic. I'm the moderator of this panel, Daniela Bass. I'm the director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. I have the honor for days through the division I lead to be tasked of the mandate of sport for development and peace globally. And since sport is mentioned, as I said, in the preamble of the 2030 Agenda, it touches all dimensions: the social, economic, environmental, cultural, and political. It covers the 3 United Nations pillars: peace and security, human rights, and development. And being in the preamble of the 2030 Agenda, it embraces all 17 goals. So for this, we needed to have on board as many partners as possible, as many stakeholders as possible. And today we will hear, starting from Victor Calise, who is the Commissioner of New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, what, for instance, the City of New York is doing in this regard, and you as a former athlete, how you can contribute to the conversation. Please.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you for having me here. It is exciting to be here at International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And Daniela, just to let you know, there's no such thing as a former athlete. It's just always an athlete. So I just want to point that out. Our goal for the city of New York is to make New York City the most accessible city in the world. And we do that through a lot of different ways. And one of it is really talking about Accessible NYC. It's the state of persons with disabilities in New York City. And there's a slide up there right now that has a picture of our latest release of Accessible NYC. And it touches on 8 pillars: transportation, employment, financial empowerment, education, housing, healthcare, technology, and access. And of course, sports is all part of this. Now, why sport? Well, one is because it really embodies what people want to do, right? That competition that's out there and being able to drive that, making sure New York City has that. Now, I am a Paralympic athlete. I competed in the 1998 Paralympic Games in Nagano, Japan. So I know well what sport can do, and I always wanted to bring it back to New York and ensure that what we do in New York City includes athletes with disabilities. I was involved in the New York City Parks Department, and I was their first accessibility coordinator, ADA coordinator. And I worked to make parks accessible for people with disabilities. But this all happened through sport, and being included in sport was really important for me, and then including it with the city of New York is important. And there's a slide up there of me facing off against Great Britain in 1998 in Paralympics. Now, I mentioned parks. New York City is the principal provider for sports land throughout New York City. We have 30,000 acres of parks. And in that is a wide variety of parks and playgrounds and recreation centers. And one of the core things of including people, and especially including kids, is we learn so much on a playground when we're kids. And if a kid with a disability can't play on a playground, then what's the sense? So we've committed to making our parks accessible and our playgrounds accessible. And I would argue, and this is a pretty bold statement, and I am a pretty pompous New Yorker, that we have the most accessible park system in the world. Our design and construction includes accessibility. And right now we have a picture of an accessible playground. There's color contrast on there. There's accessibility. There's ground level play equipment. There's lots of different things that we do in our new design and construction that improves accessibility in parks. And there isn't a park today that isn't built that doesn't go beyond accessible codes and standards. And we ensure that our parks and playgrounds are accessible. Now, we have recreation centers. We have 37 recreation centers across the city of New York. And we want to ensure that our recreation centers are building adaptive centers, making sure that there's accessible equipment within the facility, making sure that the programs and service we deliver includes people with disabilities. And when we're talking about people with disabilities, we're talking about a wide range of people. And you'll see a lot of slides up here right now that have people in wheelchairs, but that really isn't what it's about. It's about including people who are neurodiverse, people who are who are blind and low vision, ensuring that we have people who are deaf and hard of hearing involved in our programs, and making sure athletes with physical disabilities are included as well. So the slide you see up here right now is a person working out in an adaptive sports equipment. We realize that people with disabilities live in poverty, and the only way that we're going to get people with disabilities out of poverty is through work. But in the meantime, we still need to get them in our recreation centers. And our recreation centers cost $125 a year. And that's not affordable for people with disabilities. So what we've done is we've lowered our recreation fees from $125 to $25 a year for any person that wants to claim that they have a disability or shows that they have a disability. Very important for us, and there's a picture of me holding up one of those recreation cards, and for $25 a year, it gives you access to 37 recreation centers, and also allows the various programs from computer resource rooms all the way through swimming and free lessons as well. Since we've done that, since we lowered the recreation fees in 2017, we have close to 3,000 members that have signed up for that $25 a year, and hopefully to get that higher, excuse me. We work with a lot of organizations to ensure that if they're using our park space, they're also including people with disabilities. New York Roadrunners has wheelchair racing programs, and work with Achilles Track Club to ensure that athletes with disabilities are included in all areas. We have our own programs in there as well. Row New York, which uses our peers, we make sure that they're including people with disabilities in their activities, because if people are going to operate in our space, we want to make sure that they're including people with disabilities in that. We also, you heard Daniela talk about through sport. And through sport, we've built accessible infrastructures. Mm-hmm. And with that, we've come up with this first ever inclusive design guidelines for recreation spaces, which first time I'm announcing it, he is here today. But the reality is that this is needed for so long, and we talk about all of our public spaces and how we could go over and beyond the codes and standards and make them accessible for people with disabilities. Now, we have included adaptive sports through our New York City Department of Education. And we have an athlete up there who's playing wheelchair tennis, and the same athlete in a wheelchair racing chair. This athlete has come through our programs, and she has been doing some great things in both wheelchair tennis and wheelchair racing, that she is #1 in wheelchair tennis throughout the world right now. We're really excited, throughout the U.S. We're really excited to be able to build infrastructure and also be able to create and give kids with opportunities the ability to participate in sport. And they're through our public school athletic league, through Department of Education, because in our Department of Education, we have over 250,000 kids with disabilities, and we have to make sure that they're included in everything the city has to offer. We work with Special Olympics to have unified sports come into our school space and use our space as well, of course, building on those partners. Making sure, right now, professional adaptive team, actually, let me roll that back. Adaptive sports programs are included with professional teams, such as the New York Yankees and the Knicks, the United States Tennis Association, the New Jersey Nets, the Rangers, making sure that we have blind sports in there as well with National Beatball Association, and making sure that we're adding adaptive sport in every level in everything New York City does. And that's just a snippet of what we do. I know we got a lot of people to get to, and I want to thank you for having me.
Thank you, Victor. And now let's see what happens again in the United States of America. So I will turn on this side now, and I would like to ask Ms. Lindsay Krasnov, who is a member of the USA Steering Committee Football for Peace. And but you're also an historian, a journalist, a consultant working in the intersection of global sport and diplomacy. So please share with us your ideas.
Thank you very much. Yes, multiple wearer of hats, as it were. But thank you. Good afternoon. I feel like, we were a little not as spirited and animated as our opening acts here, which were wonderful. It's an honor to be here today with you, and an honor to be on this panel with my fellow colleagues. I'm honored to represent Football for Peace today. And thank you for hosting such a wonderful event. Our focus today, exploring how sport can contribute to the empowerment and inclusion of persons with disabilities, is important, timely, and one that I'm looking forward to unpacking in our conversation today. I'm a little bit more scripted than usual to try to stay within my time frame, so bear with me, please. As a historian of sport and sports diplomacy, I remind us that sports have brought people together and created bonds of commonality throughout most of the modern era. The late 18th and early 19th centuries, athletic physical activity of wide variety developed to complement more holistic, humanistic education. There was very much this idea that a healthy mind needed to rest upon a healthy body. And while organized sport as they developed in the long 19th century typically tended to be a bit more exclusionary, particularly when we get into elements such as nationalism, militarism, and the desire to create more ruling elites, we have seen since the World War I era and the democratization and popularization of modern sports, greater access and sports really serving more and more as a terrain to help build bridges between people, forge community ties, and promote meritocracy and inclusion by empowering individuals. Am I in charge of this now?
Wow. Amin? Yes, you
Yes.
are, if you wish. And otherwise, we can ask colleagues to help you.
There we go. That's all right. Oh, thank you. Football, as the world's most popular team sport, plays a particular role in this dynamic. A century ago, football provided a unique opportunity to help promote peace in the middle of a devastatingly violent war. During the Christmas truce of 1914, British and German soldiers temporarily put down their weapons and instead played a football match to mark the holiday spirit. Throughout the war, the game served the pursuit of humanity and peace despite the turmoil. In prisoner of war camps, British soldiers taught the game to their German captors, using football as a means of communication. In hospitals, doctors urged the wounded to play once they were well enough, as a way to aid their healing. The game served as an icebreaker for men who came from around the world to serve in the Allied armed forces, while on the home front, ever more women began to play the game, sometimes in front of paying crowds to great local acclaim. Despite the era's divides, football empowered individuals in the pursuit of humanity, peace, and enjoyment. And Football for Peace continues this tradition of harnessing the power and passions of football for the common good. Football for Peace was established here at the United Nations in 2006 by the late Kofi Annan and Chilean and FIFA legend Elias Figueroa, and co-founded internationally by British South Asian international Kashif Siddiqui in 2013. From its inception, Football for Peace has sought to tackle inequality and engage communities by promoting peace through people-to-people diplomacy. We are a youth football sports movement that uses the game's global influence as a force for good. Under the patronage of royal families around the world, Football for Peace uses the game to intervene and raise awareness of the planet's most pressing issues by combining community-based activity with diplomatic impact. At the end of the day, it's all about people, the planet, and peace. Football for Peace works to promote community cohesion, tackling inequalities through on-the-ground, localized football engagement activities, where there is or likely to be community marginalization. And that's in recognition that misunderstandings have the potential to flourish when different parts of communities remain isolated from each other for longer periods of time. The more integrated a community is, the more resilient it will be to the influence of those that seek to divide us. We engage in 5 key activities that work towards our goals and vision by promoting peace and the virtues of inclusion. Our signature Cities for Peace program delivers educational activities, creates Youth for Peace leaders, and leaves a legacy of a peace center in the host city. Another programmatic area we're actively engaged in are the Peace Matches Initiative, where we organize symbolic matches that bring together community, youth leaders, dignitaries, stateswomen and men, football legends, diplomats in iconic locations around the world, including the Vatican, the Eiffel Tower, and by Big Ben in London. Football for Peace has also been working in London and most recently in Paris Saint-Denis, using football-based community and school-based engagement tools to promote connectivity and leadership in grassroots communities, especially amongst school children. We promote listening to others' views and opening up communities to a wider range of ideas. That's because for us, football is a tool to reach out to and engage with people around the world. It's easy for someone to demonize the other to promote fear, but when we know the other and have a personal connection with them, it is more difficult to promote that hatred and fear. Football and sport more generally promote these personal connections. When people are brought together to play sport and build on these person-to-person connections, they also explore issues which divide them, and many begin to realize how much they have in common. This cultural exchange and knowledge transfer through communication and representation in and around the football pitch, in this particular case, is what we call a form of sports diplomacy, here football diplomacy. Thus, football diplomacy is very much at the heart of our mission. At Football for Peace, we believe in the need to promote safe and secure environments where people don't feel threatened, to explore issues that divide communities and groups, and hopefully build relationships that will be sufficiently strong if the testing times come. Through these means, sport can contribute to the empowerment and inclusion of all, including people with disabilities. I'll leave my onwards remarks for later, but thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We can leave it here for the time being. And there is a slight change in the program, if possible. That's what I suggested. Let's see if it is. You were talking about being an athlete, and I usually say I'm an athlete who can never retire. So I agree with you. One is an athlete forever. And then we heard about the part of the history of sport as an amazing tool to promote peace. And as I said, we are embracing the definition of sport as for the Kazan Action Plan. But today, and this morning, and also through sport, we want to show and demonstrate the leadership and of persons with disabilities in different areas related to sport, and also the fact that the sport can be extremely empowering. I also spoke earlier on about the 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals. So another way to promote the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, having persons with disabilities as actors of change through physical activity, is for instance, well demonstrated by Michael Haddad, who is the UNDP Regional Goodwill Ambassador in MENA. And we have a video message from him. He's from Lebanon. And I don't want to say more, but I want to see him in action and sharing with us all how through sport we can also promote all 17 goals, because we do not necessarily need to talk about persons with disabilities and disability, but also what a person with a disability can do for whatever other areas of development we're interested in through physical activities.
I'm Michael Haddad, UNDP Goodwill Ambassador for Climate Action. Today is December 3, and I thank you for inviting me to share my story briefly. At the age of 6, I suffered from a spinal cord injury that led me to be paralyzed from the chest down. Yet, I managed to overcome this ability by inventing a new way to walk wearing an exoskeleton. I did 3 world records in climbing, walking, and snowshoeing. By those records, I was delivering 3 messages. First, the person, that disability is a state of mind and nothing is impossible. We choose to be disabled, we choose to put our barriers, and we choose to remove them. Second is identity. It is who we are within the group. And third is the planet. So to connect these 3 things, it is how we look at disability. Disability in the person, disability in the community, and disability in Earth. In my experience, performance or sports is also a language to connect together and to break the barriers and to build bridges. By using sports and by using performance, in my case, I and we, and when I say we, the community, managed to deliver this message to the world, that together we could shape our identity, together we could break barriers, together we could break the impossible.
So, I mean, when I met him a few days ago, he received a very important recognition by the United Nations Secretary General because of his commitment to talk about climate change and protect our Earth. So, and then I had the opportunity to meet Michael, and I said, I mean, you're so amazing that we would like to have also you deliver some remarks to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities about empowerment and leadership and being actors of change. And talking about sport for good, I would like to ask that supports more than 160 programs in 40 countries around the world and has also offices in 9 countries. And guess what? He will also talk about London again, like the previous speaker. It seems that London is quite interesting from that perspective. Please, Adam.
Could I have... Thank you. 44 years ago, in 1975, a young Chinese man named Chao Boyu made his first attempt to climb Mount Everest. It ended in failure and actually in serious injury. Having given his sleeping bag to a fellow climber during a storm, Boyu lost both of his feet to frostbite. 2 decades later, in 1996, his lower legs were amputated after he contracted lymphoma, blood cancer. Neither of those supposedly life-changing experiences deterred Boyu. He tried to climb Everest again in 2014, again in 2015, again in 2016. On May 14th, 2018, at the age of 69 years old, he became only the 2nd double amputee to summit Everest. His achievement was recognized at the following year's the 2019 Laureus World Sports Awards in Monaco as one of the crowning achievements in sport over the previous 12 months. Every person in the room was blown away by the achievement, moved by his passion. But our hope is it reached far more than the people in that room. We hope those people reading his story in the media. There's a picture there from the China Daily, for example. And even those of you in this room who might not have heard that story before would also adjust your expectations of what's possible and think about what we see as disability, and as we just heard in the video, to paraphrase, what's a different ability. In many ways, as the Chief Executive of Laureus Sport for Good, I should be here to focus on our grant making and our work on the ground, using the power of sport to end violence, discrimination and disadvantage in 40 countries around the world. And I will touch on that. But really what I would like to talk about today is challenging perception. At the first Laureus World Sports Awards, Nelson Mandela, our founding patron, challenged us with the famous words, "Sport has the power to change the world." It's become a real motto for this whole sector, which we're very pleased about. He went on to say later in that speech, "It laughs in the face of all types of discrimination." I believe those words, but I believe we need to be challenging that discrimination still 20 years on. That's why we keep advocating at the Laureus World Sports Awards, drawing attention to inspirational stories like Chow Boyu. That's why days like today are important, and thank you to Daniela and to UNDESA and to the UN for placing this at the heart of such an important day. And it's why we work with our program partners around the world to help them move forward in this area. We make grants, as Daniela said, to more than 160 organizations around the world each year. In fact, it will be 200 in 2020. They are using sport to change their communities, end violence, discrimination, and disadvantage. We spend more than $10 million per year on grants to those programs to drive change, fully aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our entire KPI metrics come back to the SDGs. But it's not just about the money we give those programs. It's about helping those programs to grow and learn and change their own perceptions on what's possible. In 2018, last year, we brought more than 100 of those program leaders together alongside some of the world's leading athletes for a summit in Paris focused on inclusion. Partnering with Special Olympics and others, we work to train them all in being more inclusive in their program design. Because, and this may be a slight twist on the subject of today, but I think Daniela just alluded to it, reaching young people with disabilities isn't just about those young people. It's about everyone. If you look at Venn diagrams of exclusion, socioeconomic, race, gender, access to education, the young people who are often the most excluded in any community are those with physical and intellectual disabilities. If you can reach those young people, you stand a really good chance of reaching everyone. That's why, for example, I work with Special Olympics in West Africa, which was focused on educating young people with intellectual disabilities around malaria and HIV, increased access to a much wider group than just those specific individuals targeted by the program. Don't get me wrong, a lot of our programs specialize in working with young people with disabilities as their main focus. Deaf Kids International's Signing Safe Futures program uses martial arts and dance to engage deaf girls and young women across Jamaica to address the challenge of gender-based violence in their community. Right to Play Thailand work with children living on the Thai-Myanmar border who face social and economic hardships, reinforced when the child has an intellectual or physical disability. Our work with the National Paralympic Committee in Colombia focuses on the social interaction and social exclusion of people with disabilities in mainstream society. The stigma often prevents them from accessing education, particularly in rural areas, which is a story seen time and again around the world. In 2010, almost a decade ago, but you can see the picture here, Tanya Gray Thompson, who is a board member of ours and one of the most successful Paralympians in history, visited the IMAGE program in India with the cricket legend Kapil Dev. She saw a program changing lives through its interactions with young people, but she said to me just last week when we were talking about today that the most important thing wasn't just the direct impact on those children, it was the changing attitudes in the community around them. Both their own achievements and someone like Kapil Dev just being there changed how the community thought about those young people with disabilities living amongst them. It really changed perception. Sport's been doing that for a long time. Ludwig Gutmann, a Jew who escaped Nazi Germany, founded a sports program at Stoke Mandeville Hospital in the UK in the 1940s. He believed sport was a method of therapy, increasing physical strength and self-respect. He held his first games in 1948 for 16 people. By 1952, that number had grown to 130. I'm not sure of the number in 1998, but it's continued to grow as the Paralympic Games has become a sporting mega event, filling stadiums, attracting sponsors, signing broadcast deals, doing everything that the Olympics does and more. That's a powerful story of changing perceptions, but it happened because of exclusion. No one knew where to put disability sport. It wasn't taken seriously. That wasn't just a problem in sport, but in society. This was a time in England when children with disabilities did not have access to mainstream education. I mentioned just before, we're still working to tackle that issue in some countries even today. So sport reflects society, but sport can lead society. The Paralympic Games continue to change attitudes, but can't change the world on their own in 10 days every 4 years. Our programs continue to change lives, but they can't be in every community in the world yet. Chow Boyu changed attitudes, but can't climb every mountain. So my challenge to this room, and Daniela touched on this, is not what can we do to use sport to help young people with disabilities. It's how can we use sport to change attitudes, change experiences, and challenge the world to be fully inclusive of people with all forms of different abilities. As they said before, Mandela told us sport has the power to change the world, and we believe this is a key way we can show he was right. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for all the good work. Now, you have been talking about youth, and I would like to give the mic, and maybe we could change the name instead of Days at the ISD to a very young speaker who has been sitting quietly behind there because there is no space at the table, which is not correct. No. So I need a chair, please, for Annika. And I will tell you a little bit more about who Annika is, what Annika does. But definitely we can start with soccer. She loves playing soccer. Annika Emmert, how do you pronounce your name? Emmert. Is a 14 years young lady. She loves soccer. She plays in a soccer team, but you'll say more about that. You have many interests in your life. But today we would like to talk about how youth with the sport and through sport can give good examples and lead others with and without disabilities. It doesn't really matter. To be engaged in a sport and through sport promote leadership, inclusion, accessibility, self-esteem, team spirit, and whatever sport can provide us with to enhance our life and the life of the communities we live in. And then I think that as an introduction, yes, you have your name now. I would like to give the floor to Annika. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela. Okay. My name is Annika Emmer. I'm 14 years old from St. Augustine, Florida. And I was... how do I work this?
Shall I help?
Yes, please.
I'm the mess. I'll
Okay.
tell you.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you so much. A little bit of a backstory about me is that I've been playing soccer since I was 4, though my older sister insists that I was younger than that. I'm now 14 years old, and I just started 9th grade, so I'm a freshman this year in high school. I've always played soccer. It's one of the things I've never wanted to give up, no matter what people have ever said to me. Throughout my life, other players have always thought of me as an easy mark and always see my difference as a weakness. I know this because as you grow up with the difference, you get really good at reading people's faces and body language. But I've always proved them wrong. I'm sure I've had a few off plays, but all the best usually do. I've always pushed myself to become better, and that's something I'll never stop doing. Sports has taught me so much throughout my life and given me so many different stories to tell in all of my interviews, but that's not why I play. I play because I love the feeling I get when I make it past the other players and see their faces of defeat because they couldn't catch up to me. Every child like me should be able to feel like that. It teaches me so many different life lessons, such as physical improvement and learning how to physically better myself through my disability and learn my limits. Strong relationships with my teammates and learning to become a team player. The pursuit of personal excellence and pushing myself to become the best that I can be. Overcome adversity and show others that my disability does not define who I am or how I play on the field. Discipline and learning how not to react to what others say to me, no matter how much I want to. Collaboration and cooperation by helping my team achieve their shared goals and developing my own goals to pursue. The crucial life skills I get from playing soccer is teamwork and learning how to handle other people's opinions, leadership, and confidence in not only myself, on the field, but in my daily and personal life of my disability. I've been on multiple championship teams throughout my 10 years of playing soccer, but that's not just because of me. I've been on this one team that I've been on since I've moved to Florida. We're called the Whaling Eagles. That's our team name. And we have a past 2-year record of 55 wins, 2 losses, and 3 ties. So throughout the past 2 years, we've only lost twice. Those girls on that team, they're like my family and hold such a special place in my heart. I've always loved to help others and guide them. When I was 10 and in 4th grade, I was gifted my first 3D printed bionic arm by Limitless Solutions out of UCF. It was like no arm I've ever had. It was blue with pink hibiscus flowers all over, and ever since receiving my arm, I've been more open about sharing my stories and inspiring others to do the same. One of my favorite things to do is reach out to new parents of a child with a disability and give them advice for their child and how to keep them motivated through trying times, and also calm their fears of what others will say to them and their child. The world sees us as different, but it doesn't have to, and I will continue to keep sharing my stories and motivate others to do the same until no parent or child will have to worry about hiding in the dark in fear of what others will think about them. Though it may take the rest of my life to do so, I won't stop until there has been great changes.
Well, dear Annika, thank you. Now, for a second, I remove my hat as a director of this division, and I just want to wear the hat of an Italian who loves fashion. Now, when I saw, can you show the beautiful thing that you designed by, I mean, isn't it amazing? Please. And it's beautiful because, you know, each person can design his or her own one based on their taste. And it's fantastic also the way actually it works and moves. It's amazing. So I was fascinated by it because I find it extremely fashionable.
Thank you.
And talking about Victor, come next to me. Come on.
She's the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's give space to youth. So, how did I get in touch with Annika? Well, it's interesting. I have a profile in LinkedIn, and one day I was contacted by a gentleman whose name is Albert, and he said, "I am interested. I work in Florida. I study in Florida, or I started operating in Florida now. Somebody immediately after me will explain to you a little bit better what's all about." And he said, "I saw that you deal with the disability issues, and I would like to show you what we have been doing here." Okay, I said, "Since you are in New York, come and pass by." He said, "Wow, I wouldn't have imagined that it was so easy to get in touch with somebody within the UN." Well, I said, "I'm atypical, so no problem." So I met him, and he showed me some dépliants and pictures of amazing kids with amazing limbs and beautiful designs and colors, so joyful. And there was next to them the actor, I can't remember his name, who is Iron Man. Yeah, thank you. So I said, "Oh my, this is so..." And then he introduced me to this amazing young lady. And I said, "But we deal with sport as well." And I said, "And you like soccer, so what a lovely combination to see how young people can empower and are leaders with and through sport, be that they have or not a disability, and so they can promote development. In this case, there is a plenty of STEM and technology, and also promote peace, because no matter what happens, if we can show that life can be beautiful, this gives also inner peace. We are talking about many kinds of peace here. So I thank you so much for your speech, and I would like now to ask, wow, this is challenging, Mrdula Penditi, who is the branding director of Limitless Solutions, which is an engineering innovation company that helps children in need through the design and delivery of 3D printed bionic limbs. And I know that one of your dreams is to be able to provide these limbs in the future for free to any kid wherever they are in the world. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you all and provide our stories and our background so that we can help impact the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and support empowerment and inclusivity. My name is Merdula Pedenti. As it was said, I'm the branding director, and I help create the brand of Limitless Solutions. So Limitless Solutions is a 501c3 nonprofit. We operate out of the University of Central Florida in Orlando, Florida. We specialize in creating artistic, expressive, and empowering accessibility technology. We use 3D printing and electromyography technology, EMG for short, to help power our devices. So our team is made up of 9 UCF alumni and 30 UCF undergraduate students. So we are a little smaller than most people kind of expect. Okay, cool, it worked. My mission as well is to always make sure that we follow the mission of creative expression and empowerment in everything that we do. And I'll talk more about that when we go further down, how important it is when we're talking about empowerment in sports, how that plays a role in our mission. To start, let's talk about the background of how monumental the issue it is that we're trying to solve. 1,500 or 4 out of 10,000 babies are born with upper limb differences in the United States each year, according to the article, Updated National Birth Prevalence Estimates for Selected Birth Defects in the United States. The CDC also states that a couple of the challenges those with limb reductions may face include the following: difficulty with normal development such as motor skills, needing assistance with daily activities, limitations with things like sports or other movement, and potential emotional and social issues because of their physical appearance. And so focusing on those last 2 points, which really ties everything together, what we're talking about here, the American Academy of Pediatrics, as it relates to children in sports specifically, report that promoting the participation of children with disabilities in sports, recreation, and physical activity, the most common barriers are not just mobility limitations or high cost or lack of access to programs, but it also includes that children's lower perceived self-confidence, and then that backed by the lack of social support from homes, families, or communities, lowered perceptions of the child's abilities play a huge factor in some of the issues that we're trying to tackle. People with disabilities are socially segregated. They experience, quote, negative stereotypes and low performance expectations, and that naturally limits opportunities for those with disabilities to participate. The report concludes that true inclusivity is not only through inclusion of special ed programs, which is obviously very important, and it starts the conversation, but empowering children with disabilities is achieved by having them participate alongside their able-bodied peers as well. And so, and it leads to reduced societal barriers. And so there's a quote that this report had that I thought was perfect for what Limitless stands for. It is important that children are empowered with an I can do attitude versus being discouraged from a you can't do that attitude. And so that is where we come in. We focus on empowerment at Limitless Solutions, and we use technology as a vehicle to provide that path to empowerment. We're founded in 2014 by a group of UCF students, and now most of them are alumni, and they continue to promote the mission. Our 3 main projects are Bionic Arms, Project Xavier, our hands-free wheelchair control mechanism, and accessible video game technology. All 3 use 3D printing and EMG technology to power them. So how do they work? Our Bionic Arms, as you saw, Annika has one herself. It works through EMG technology. You place sensors on the limbs with the muscle actuation, and so when you flex your muscle, it opens and closes the arm. It's pretty straightforward. And then our wheelchair technology also does the same, let me go to the slide so you can see what it looks like. A wheelchair technology is operated with the same type of actuation. It's muscle flexing, but we use the temporalis muscles, and when you flex your temporalis muscles, you can drive the wheelchair by moving the mechanism that is attached to the joystick. In our training video games, we use to help the kids learn how to use their arms. Our team develops video games and video game controllers that are accessible. They use the same technology that our arms do. And so when you flex your muscle, you can make the character jump. You can make the character attack an enemy. And so with all that being said, even though all of that fancy technology does all those cool things, that's not what we focus on. We focus on the fact that that technology empowers our kids. It affords independence. It inspires creativity. It makes users believe in their innate competence they already had before they even got the technology in the first place. It changes society's perceptions as well. It doesn't have to be a negative thing when you are disabled. In fact, it most of the time is not. It instead is Annika, a soccer player wearing her bionic arm speaking to the United Nations. It is Shaquem Griffin, a UCF football player with a limb difference being drafted to the Seattle Seahawks. It is Alex using his custom Iron Man bionic arm delivered by Robert Downey Jr. himself to confidently ride his bike. It's Juliana, a competitive cheerleader, proudly sporting her team's logo while she competes. It's inspiring. It makes people stop asking what's wrong with you and makes people start saying, where'd you get that arm? And if they could do it, I can too. So that's how Limitless hopes to champion inclusivity for everyone. And that's how our mission strives to empower children with an I can do attitude and their surrounding communities with a yes they can attitude as well. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a wonderful video I wanted to show you about yes I can. But unfortunately, there is the systems are not compatible. What can I tell you? Technology. So we will share with you another time. But talking about technology, I would like to ask now Caroline Gibson from Microsoft, whom we already had as a guest in the past, to share more about what Microsoft is doing. Caroline is a modern workplace specialist in Microsoft, serving the public sector agencies in the city of New York and the state of New Jersey. And she's also a member of Microsoft's Accessibility Empowerment team, focused on educating employees and the public on how Microsoft designs its technology to be accessible and beneficial to all. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you. So it's amazing sitting up here on this panel and looking around. It's rather apparent to me that there are people far more qualified to talk about how sports empowers people with disabilities. We have incredible athletes up here. Particularly, I love seeing Francesco because I happen to run with Achilles, and he passes me very frequently, very quickly, when he's running. So I want to start by kind of addressing the elephant in the room, right? Which is, why is Microsoft here? We're not a sports company. We're not an accomplished athlete. We're a technology company. And I really spent some time pondering this after Daniela invited me today because, it's something I had to really think about. And here's really the answer, is that technology is intertwined in every single thing we do in our lives. And sports is no exception to that. Some of you may use technology to actually play your sport, but it can be far more simple than that too. Imagine it's, using technology to send a text message to your friend to ask where the meet is and what time. Then using that technology to navigate to the location where you are meeting up. So there's a deep interconnection between technology and sport. And if we're going to talk about how we're going to include people with disabilities in sport, we must include them in the technologies that we're building. So I don't know if my slides will show back up, but Microsoft cares deeply about this. So our company's mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So I do want to highlight a few things we're doing today, both on the individual side with the athlete, and then also on the organization. I'll explain why that's important. So when we talk about athletes, you'll see a photo up here. It's of a couple kids playing Xbox. And we created Xbox adaptive controllers because for those of you who are familiar with video games, a lot of the controllers require you to have pretty strong dexterity in both of your thumbs, and many people don't have that ability. And so we created these controllers to be highly customizable based on the abilities you have, the mobility you have, so that everyone can play. And the reason this is important is that when we talk about sports, teams bond on the field, but they also bond off the field. And many times this can be done through video games. So we want to ensure that everybody is included in that bonding, that creation of friendship, that healthy competition, and creating that community. No one should be left out. So the next photo I'm showing is to talk about something called Microsoft Soundscape. And Microsoft Soundscape is actually something that was developed out of a research project of ours. And what it is this incredible technology that uses 3D audio to help people with visual disabilities navigate the world around them. So it could be something like getting to whatever sports arena you need to get to, but also it can be used for fun games like you see up on the slide. So what you're seeing is actually a photo from last year. We partnered with the Lighthouse School of the Blind, and we did something called Paddlepalooza. And what Paddlepalooza was, it was actually a way for us to initially test this technology. And we got 2 people in a kayak, one sighted, one with a visual disability. And the person with visual disability had the Soundscape device on, and they were listening for the beacons. And they were trying to navigate and help guide where to go to then race to all the different beacons and get back to the shore quickest. So it was a really cool game for everyone to play, but my absolute favorite piece of this is that when comparing a kayak that had someone who was sighted and someone with a disability versus 2 sighted people, the person with the disability was vastly better at navigating than the sighted person, which just goes to show, someone had mentioned, I wrote it down, challenging perceptions. Talk about challenging perceptions and showing that when you give somebody technology, it can highlight the abilities that they already have. So I thought that was really, really cool. So now let's transition to talking about organizations. And you may be saying, we're talking about individuals in sports. Why do organizations matter in this? Some of it's because of organizations that are on the stage today. I mean, I'm blown away by some of the things that Limitless is doing, some of the other organizations we've heard about. And think about how many organizations there are out there that are trying to help people with disabilities. So we're working with various organizations in 2 ways. The first is a partnership. So this photo up on the screen is from the Special Olympics of a guy celebrating after what I would assume is a victory. But what we do with them is twofold. One, we've partnered with the Special Olympics for a number of years. We are fortunate enough to have monetary, money that we can donate, and so we do make monetary donations to the Special Olympics, ensure that they have the resources they need to conduct their events. But the second piece is technology. So we have a team that has given them technology and then helps them build things. And the coolest example, in my opinion, that highlights why this is important is that there's a vast amount of data that goes into organizing one of these events. You have to have athlete information, medical information. So what we did is we helped them build a database with all the information that you need on the athletes so that real time, on the sidelines, if something happens, you have all the medical needs of each athlete ready and available so that as people play sports, they're able to be safe. So the second way that we work with organizations is through inclusive design. And Victor actually mentioned inclusive design as well. Microsoft very strongly believes in this. For those of you who don't know some of the principles, one of them is we need to be designing technologies, products, everything from the get-go with everyone in mind. We need to acknowledge our exclusions and eliminate them. And one way that we do that in Microsoft is inclusive hiring. So as we're developing our technologies, designing them, we need to include people with disabilities in that design process to allow the diversity of our people to help speak for what we might be missing. So this is really important in a number of ways. All of our technologies are building accessibility into them. Things like being able to dictate emails, read aloud, documentation, break it up for people who maybe have a hard time reading into various syllables. Things that then allow the thousands of organizations around the world who work with Microsoft products to then hire more people with disabilities, have the tools that they need to allow them to work, or enable them to work better, I should say. And with that, you then naturally create a global cycle of inclusive design. When you have more people with disabilities working in various organizations, you're naturally going to design everything that you do more inclusively. So, as I close out, I'll leave you with one statement and something I think is very important. We absolutely must encourage and enable organizations around the world who are involved in sports in any facet, whether it's the person building the facilities that we will play in or building the technology to help you navigate and get there. They must include people with disabilities from the get-go, so that as this world rapidly changes and is designed and developed around us, that people with disabilities are not only included, but empowered to play the sports that they want to play. Thank you.
If you wouldn't have asked yourself, why is Microsoft invited? And then you shared all of this, I wonder if you knew why Microsoft was invited from the very first moment. I mean, it would have been an encyclopedia of activities, very important projects that Microsoft actually is developing. So thank you very much. Now I would like to give the voice to another young disability advocate. We are privileged today to have youth on board, the leaders of today and tomorrow. And I would like to introduce to you Miss Yang Yu Lee, who is a disability rights advocate and the senior at the Northern Valley Regional High School in Somerset in New Jersey. So after being denied entrance with her guide dog at numerous facilities, Lee co-founded Vita, as we would say in Italian, or Vita probably here in the United States, which is visually impaired total access, to spread awareness about the American with Disability Act. And Lee also initiated and ran a campaign to build a sidewalk in an area with fast-moving traffic to improve safety for people with disabilities, and much more. So we would like to hear from you, Lee, your experience, and being an advocate, your also suggestions, and maybe if you have an idea that we could develop together and see where we stand with implementation of your idea in 1 year from now. Thank you. A challenge. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity to address such a distinguished audience and such an amazing panel of speakers. I am beyond honored to be speaking here this afternoon. The focus for today's event is promoting leadership for persons with disabilities, as well as highlighting the role of sports in promoting inclusion and peace. I've been fortunate enough to witness both aspects in my life, so I would like to share with you the insights I've gained through those experiences. And before I move on, I just want to highlight the fact that it was through sport and my involvement with running, which I'm going to talk about later, that I was able to have the confidence to advocate for my needs and to do all my work that I'm about to go into. As a disabled person, I can say it is critical to speak out for ourselves. When we see or experience a problem, it is really easy to have other people deal with it. It is easier to victimize ourselves and blame others for the problems that we face. So when I got denied entrance at one of my favorite local restaurants because I had a guide dog, my first instinct was to leave a nasty review on Yelp and tell all my friends not to go there. But what problem would that have solved? The restaurant may have lost many customers or may even have had to pay fines with a bad taste in their mouths. In ruining one local business, the root of the problem would have been left unsolved. Instead, I believe that the bigger problem had to do with the lack of awareness about the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, which states that visually impaired individuals are permitted to travel with their guide dogs to all public locations. And surprisingly, when I told the restaurant and another youth organization from which I had been denied entrance about the ADA, they apologized really sincerely. And this made me realize that these people weren't denying me entrance out of spite, rather they just didn't know. To tackle the issue, a friend and I formed VITA, Visually Impaired Total Access, and this was to spread awareness to a wider audience. We spoke to restaurant and small business owners, posted flyers on their walls, participated in local events, and promoted our cause at a nearby town hall. And little by little, the vision we have for a more inclusive and aware society is becoming a reality. So following the launch of our campaign, another restaurant owner told me I couldn't enter on account of my guide dog, but after showing her the newspaper article we were featured in, she apologized and actually thanked us for educating her. So, and my friend and I also formed a club at school based on the mission of VITA, and I'm really happy to see that non-disabled youth are becoming increasingly aware of the challenges and the achievements of those with disabilities. So I sincerely believe that when disabled individuals take the initiative and are part of the driving force for change, it empowers the disabled community, and it's also more effective in achieving the ultimate goal as well. So leadership doesn't really end with achieving goals for oneself. It's also about empowering others around you. So from mentoring a younger blind student in my school district to working as a TA at the Seoul National School for the Blind in South Korea and helping out in a shelter, a special education classroom in Guatemala, I found that having a disabled person help fellow disabled individuals was a profound experience for both parties involved. My mentees were better able to connect with me and share their struggles with me because they knew that I knew what they were going through. This allowed us to connect at a deeper level, and many of them told me that they were greatly motivated and gained much hope from being taught by somebody who'd been in their shoes. I also left our sessions invigorated because it felt great to help other people when I knew that so many people had supported me in getting me to where I am today. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about my experience with running. I loved running ever since I joined Girls on the Run in the 4th grade. I loved it for the physical invigoration, of course, but also for the friendships I formed and the sense of belonging I felt by being part of the club. Clearly, I could not run on my own completely independently, so I ran with a sighted running guide, the two of us bound together with a tether we held onto. My coaches were enthusiastic to have me be a part of Girls on the Run, and my tiny elementary school peers weren't annoyed for having to make modifications or to watch out for the safety of another student when they couldn't really run very well themselves at that point. Ironically, physical exercise was a great equalizer. The fact that I couldn't see very well didn't change the fact that we had to suffer through 8 laps around the school, up 2 from the previous practice. My guides helped me around obstacles, and I actually encouraged them to keep going when they wanted to stop. Through running, I became more outgoing and gained not only the confidence to advocate for my needs, but to reach out and connect with other people. I want to take a moment to thank my coaches over all these years for fostering this inclusive environment their eagerness to take my needs into consideration, and their belief in me as an advocate, as an active member of the group, was what allowed me to have the positive experience that I had. So when I entered middle school and found that it lacked a track team or a running group, I started one. So I found coaches at the school and I spoke to gym classes to get students excited about running. Finally, the club took off, and we completed a successful 5K at the end of the season, and the club still exists the last time I heard. In high school, I am an 800-meter runner in my school's track and field team. Running track competitively, rather than as a part of a club, definitely presents a new set of fears and challenges. In the beginning, I actually didn't know how much of a race I had left because I'd forgotten to tell my guide to read out the distance markers. But through trial and error and through extraordinary teamwork and trust, we are successful. I am proud to be a part of the team, to do just as many hills as my teammates, and run in meets wearing my school's Blue Norseman uniform. In closing, I know that it isn't every day that someone as young as me is able to have her voice heard at the United Nations. So I would like to thank everyone involved for granting me this amazing opportunity to bring the perspective of a visually impaired individual to the table. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you, Juliana Lee. And talking about youth, there are also very major football teams around the world that are very much interested in utilizing sport or through sport to strengthen self-confidence, team spirit, and create the citizens of today and tomorrow. And we decided to invite one of these major soccer teams from a country that I dearly love, which is my country, Italy. We invited one of the activities that this major soccer team does, and it's called Intercampus. Intercampus is a not-for-profit social project which is funded and run by the professional Italian football club Inter. And it was Inter founded this club through the president Massimo Moratti in February in 1996. And then operations of these clubs, Intercampus clubs, started in 1997. And they have clubs all over the world where youth up to the age of 13, particularly those who belong to very unprivileged areas, can team together, and through sport actually they find a new way of looking at society and grow from there. So the current president of Intercampus is Carlotta Moratti, with Angelo Maria Moratti as the managing director. And today Intercampus has decided to focus on the concept of ability. And this is why Intercampus identified as a speaker Dr. Carlo Riva, who is the director of the not-for-profit association L'Abilità, Ability, based in Milan, Italy. And he is a teaching assistant and on subjects related to inclusion pedagogy at the University of Bicocca in Milan, which is a very prestigious one. And then you are also, of course, being active in many other areas. I will stop here, but your CV can be seen online, or we also distributed them as well as the CV, the curriculum vitae of all other experts here. So we would like to know what ability is for Intercampus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you for giving the opportunity. Thank you for giving the opportunity to Intercampus and l'Abilità Onlus to share with you a new project for inclusion for children with disabilities and children without disabilities. Intercampus is a corporate social responsibility program that supports social, religious, and racial equality worldwide, with specific focus on children's rights. Intercampus promotes the rights to play for every single child. Intercampus works in 29 countries and involves 10,000 children, boys and girls, from 6 to 13 years old, and around 200 local volunteers and educators. Intercampus socially improves the community it works with, giving children the possibility to play, develop their personality, be integrated and participate proactively in the society they live in. The goal for Intercampus is leaving no one beyond. No matter the capabilities the children have, their abilities or disabilities, we want them to be involved and play together. L'Abilità is a non-profit organization active in Milan since 1998 and is networked to social and health services, schools, public and private entities. Since its birth, our association has grown, reaching the present status: 4 headquarters in different areas of Milan, 60 qualified workers, partnership with the main universities and health institutes. Every day, we take care of 200 children with disability and their families. For 20 years, l'Abilità has been working to create and run innovative services and projects with daily educational and recreational activities, promoting the right play, counseling, respite care, school inclusion, family support, professional and teachers training in Italy are part of our culture of disability. This is our philosophy of Intercampus and philosophy of l'Abilità Onlus. Every child has a dream. The dream of playing for a long time with a lot of friends, of having fun and discovering the world. We think that every child with or without disabilities needs to play and live in an educational context. If a child doesn't play, that child can't develop his emotive, physical, cognitive ability. If a child with disability doesn't play, his disability is bound to increase. Because disability is not an illness. Disability is a human condition. That's why that child is first of all a child and must play as all the children do, because this is the most important way to the inclusion for him. The opportunity for children to stay together, the opportunity for children with their different identities to stay together, to play with their capacities or difficulties, to communicate on a one-to-one basis or in a group. This is what real inclusion is made of. Intercampus staff and l'Abilità Onlus team work together finding a new way to make all the children feel better. We want to understand how to create inclusion by playing football, by playing with a ball, with a group of children with and without intellectual disabilities. We have a goal. All the children have fun together, want to start the game again, and have the opportunity to create a new relationship. Using pedagogical methods and strategies tailored to children with intellectual disabilities, we produce tools to make the play and the rules more clear. We use photos, pictures, symbols, and cards to communicate with children with memory and learning difficulties. We set up little groups of children in order to take care of every need, especially for children with emotional impairment. We use easy-to-read language in order to enable all the children to understand the rules. We set the space so that children can see and move independently in order to help children with orientation problem. We schedule time by means of diaries with 4 or 5 pictures on sequence to explain to hyperactive children how to focus attention on single activities. This inclusion project tells us the best practices. For the best inclusion, we need always to make usable the space where we live and the material that we handle. In this project, it was important for us to explore the meaning of a ball during the growth of a child. All the children, the newborn, the toddler, the teen, play with the ball, alone or together. All over the world, in ancient time or today, by playing with the ball, every child discovers concepts, relations, words, and emotions. With children with disabilities, so we use light balls, balls with different colors, large or little ones, rows or small ones, to allow every child to touch and play with them. A new culture of disability funds itself on learning and training on what is important to do for people with disabilities in order to build with them independence, full life, self-esteem, respect, and first of all, freedom. Because it's the value and the difference of everyone that create a new civil community where all of us want to live, now and tomorrow. Thank you.
I loved the word freedom. I loved it. So thank you very much. And now we move to the last speaker of the day, and then we will open the floor for questions, interventions, comments. A gentleman, a young gentleman, whose name is Francesco Maggisano. And we already heard his name mentioned during the panel today. So I'm really curious to know a little bit more about this elite para triathlete and paracyclist racing on the national and international levels, representing his home team, the Three Achilles and the USA. Francesco is totally blind and races with a pilot or a guide, and has qualified for and raced at national championships for both triathlon and cycling, and has represented the United States of America in ITU International Triathlon. I mean, and much more. I'll stop here. So we have a real athlete. Thank you very much, Francesco. The floor is yours.
Cool. Thanks for having me. This is great to be here to speak. My name is Francesco Maggisano. I'm here representing Achilles International. So we're on the first slide.
Waiting for it to come up, but yes.
Okay. Well, so Achilles International is a nonprofit with the mission to empower and enable people with all types of disabilities to participate in mainstream running and endurance events. So that includes marathons, 5Ks, triathlons, which is swim, bike, run, whatever variation of those sports. Basically, endurance events. The way I'd like to start this out is by highlighting one of our athletes pictured. And his name's Bill Riley. And Bill found himself in a wheelchair. And most people would stop being active, I think, if they found themselves in that situation. But Bill very embodies the type of athletes we have, and honestly the perseverance that a lot of people with disabilities have, by wanting to finish a marathon. Now, there was one problem with that. Bill was unable to propel himself forward even in a wheelchair. So what Bill did was he flipped his wheelchair around and kicked himself backwards to cross the finish line of the New York City Marathon and a bunch of other marathons around the country. And I think that's just one example of the type of resilience that people with disabilities have to show others. Next. Yeah.
Next slide.
Cool. So one difference that I'd like to highlight about Achilles and the key focus that we have is mainstreaming. So we not only want to get people with disabilities involved in sports and active, but we want to do that within the public eye, mainstreaming, do it within their communities, both so that they can participate within their local society, and also so that they are raising awareness with the public and people who might not be aware of people with disabilities being able to participate in events like 5Ks, marathons, and so on. So next one. So Achilles is made up of 6 core programs. It's the national, international chapters. We have the Hope and Possibility Race series. We have the Freedom Team, Achilles Kids. And we have the Marathon Tour, and finally Try Achilles, which is what I am the director of. So next. So our national and international chapters is the bread and butter of what Achilles is made of. We have over 30 chapters all around the country and with a presence in all 50 states. And further, we have chapters in 41 different countries with a presence in over 71 countries. And this includes anywhere from New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Mongolia, obviously US, Canada. I mean, we're spread out pretty well. And this does a really good job of diversifying the group of people that we put together for these events. So one example of this is every year for the New York City Marathon, we have over 250 athletes with disabilities, plus all of their guides, fly in to the U.S., to New York City, to participate in the New York City Marathon. And this is great because we field a pretty big team for the marathon. People see us on the street running. They know who we are, and it raises awareness. And, it's a great program. So, our Hope and Possibility Race, this ties into the awareness raised by our national, international chapters. And so what it is a race series. Some of them are 5K, 4-mile, 10K. It varies. But basically, it's a race that different chapters can choose to put on, like St. Petersburg chapter, Munich. And it involves local runners of that community in this Achilles-sponsored race. And it's usually an annual event, and it's a great way to, again, engage people who might not be aware of athletes with disabilities, or even engage athletes with disabilities who would not have heard of Achilles. So every year, every June, in Central Park, we have over 5,000 runners participate in the New York City Hope and Possibility Race. And it's a great showing because we can see all the different types of disabilities and how they're able to get active. Cool. So next we have the Freedom Team. The Freedom Team is made up of wounded, ill, and injured veterans who, a lot of them, are losing limbs, legs, or arms because they stepped on an IED or a mine. And this goes to the initiative of turning minefields into playing fields, where we're trying to get these people, firstly, inform them that, it's possible to be active and run marathons and do Ironman triathlons, even if you're missing both legs, or you're missing both legs and an arm. So it's firstly raising that awareness and providing the education to the individual people, and then providing them with the ability to pursue those types of goals. So, I mean, if you're sitting there in a hospital bed and you just lost both your legs last week, your mind's obviously all over the place. To have someone who's actually lost both legs and who's done multiple marathons as a double leg amputee come in and tell you, hey man, let's do a marathon. It's a really powerful thing to do, and it's what we pride ourselves in providing for our athletes. Cool. Next, we have Achilles Kids. Achilles Kids is really special because it starts people at a very early age, K through 12, and it gets them involved in organized sports within their communities. So we service over 11,000 kids all around the country, and we provide them with a plan and the ability to basically run the full distance of a marathon, 26.2 miles, within a school semester or a school year. And they're able to work towards this goal. It teaches them goal settings, it gets them active, and they win prizes when they hit that goal of 26.2 miles. So it's a great way to, again, raise awareness within their own local communities and get people involved with helping them reach that goal. And the earlier we can get people with disabilities active, I think the better, because it changes your life so much. Cool. Next, we have the Marathon Tour. Now, this is somewhat in conjunction with our Freedom Team, but it involves our hand cycle team. So basically, if you're amputated or you're having some sort of muscular issue with your torso, you can do a hand cycle if you're unable to run on running blades. And so our hand cycle team does what's called the Marathon Tour, where we hit up most of the major marathons in the country, including Disney, LA, Boston, Chicago, Marine Corps Marathon, and of course New York City Marathon. So it's a great series of race, and it gets people on the road and spreading the awareness. We could be coming back to awareness of, you know, people with disabilities at these major races. It's not segregated races or events that these people are participating in. It's these massive races with tens of thousands of people running, and they're all seeing these athletes who are missing limbs or who are blind or whatnot finish really fast. So yeah. Cool. And next we have Try Achilles, which is the program that I'm the director of. Try Achilles is basically all things that isn't just running. So triathlon, which is, again, swim, bike, run. We do cycling races. We might even do some obstacle course next year. We'll see. But basically anything to do with multi-sport activity. And this goes back to another one of our core principles, which is providing the opportunity for these people to participate. So an example of this is cycling and triathlon is a pretty financially taxing sport. It's very expensive. And so one thing we do is provide athletes with the equipment and the transportation to be able to do these sorts of events that they would not normally be able to do because of socioeconomic status and whatnot. So that's just another one of our core things that we really champion. And also, one thing that it emphasizes is the different levels of people we engage. So it's not all pro athletes getting to do this marathon tour with hand cycles or whatnot. It's literally everyone. I mean, like throughout high school and college, the most I ran was like chasing the ice cream truck down the block. Like, I'm not an athlete by birth at all. And I met a guy in a supermarket checkout line who said, "Hey, you ever heard of an organization called Achilles? You should come join us." And that's honestly how I got involved. So it's really recruiting anyone who has the will and want to do this type of thing and getting them involved and giving them the opportunity. So next. And finally, it's just how to get involved. I think the best way to get involved, whether you're an athlete with a disability or someone who wants to help an athlete with a disability, is find out where your nearest Achilles chapter is. So for here, we have a Manhattan chapter meets in Central Park. We have Queens, Brooklyn. We have chapters, like I said, all around the country, around the world. And honestly, it's just showing up and getting involved with the community. And that both helps on a micro level by helping out, you know, people with disabilities, and also helps on a macro level because the more awareness and attention we're bringing into mainstreaming of people with disabilities, obviously in sports, but then it leads to things outside of sports, the better it is for all of us. And I mean, even when we go on vacation, like I went to Japan last year and I looked up the Tokyo chapter of Achilles and ran with them, and it's just exchanging ideas and concepts with people who are different from us gives us a diversified view on life and just adds more perspective. So that's about it. Thanks.
What a panel. What a panel. Well, the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs and the division I lead, the Division for Inclusive Social Development, is committed to supporting a coordinated effort for advancing sport for development and for peace, together with persons with and without disabilities and people of all ages. At the international level, both thanks to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and on the preamble of the 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals, we would really like to make sure that we talk about inclusive sport in society for elite athletes, for spectators, and for all people in between. And we in DAISA firmly believe that sport and all types of physical activity have great potential to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals. Now, talking about goals, next year, the United Nations celebrates 75 years since its establishment. And the Social Commission was also established together with the United Nations in 1946 to promote social justice. And then in 1995, it was renamed the Commission for Social Development, and we embrace all of these social groups from indigenous peoples to persons with disabilities, older people, youth, family, and so on. So I would like to invite you all to attend the Commission for Social Development that will take place next year, early February, to celebrate together 25 years of social development 75 years since the United Nations was created, and it was created immediately after the Second World War to bring peace on earth. So let's try to do something together, to celebrate peace through sport next year, all together in an inclusive manner. I would like to share with you 3 questions, but I will send to you these 3 questions. This is my challenge. And let's see what kind of answers I get from you. The questions are, through sport, physical activity, dance, games, and persons with disabilities, how can you promote diversity and inclusion? This is to the panelists, but also to the audience. The second one, no person, no country, and no private sector has to be left behind in promoting development and peace. How can sport and persons with disabilities achieve this goal with you? And the third question, how can you, through either your story, we have heard a few good ones today, your experience, the products or the services you have, so how can you, through all of these related to sport, contribute to the empowerment and the inclusion of persons with disabilities? So these are 3 challenges I am sharing with you, and I will send you these questions, and I really hope to get answers. There will be a deadline. Now, since next year we have 25 years of social development, and we want to make sure that it is sustainable. And we would really like to celebrate also 75 years of United Nations to promote multilateralism. You see how many different cultures, countries, and languages are sitting around here, and yet, thanks to these conversations, we make things happen. So let's identify a way to celebrate it together. Now that I said these couple of things that I really wanted to, before we open the floor for about 10-15 minutes maximum, I would like to share with you a video, a 1-minute video that has been provided to us by Inter. Thank you.
Tenho direito a jogar.
Eu tenho direito para jogar.
Mimi napenda kucheza mpira. J'ai droit à jouer. O direito de jogar. Eu também tenho direito a jogar. I have the right to play. Tenho direito de jogar. E assim eu acabo de ganhar. Futile Sahel. I have the right to play.
Eu sou mediagro.
Intercampus. Eu tenho direito a jogar.
Intercampus.
J'ai droit de jouer.
Intercampus.
Eu tenho
direito para jogar.
Intercampus. Intercampus.
Intercampus.
Intercampus. Intercampus. Intercampus. Intercampus. Intercampus.
Thank you so much. Indeed, it is the right to play for all people of all ages and of all abilities, and for children with and without disabilities. We have heard some amazing examples, such as the one of Intercampus and others, where people and children in this case play together. And they don't really, it doesn't, you know, sport is such an equalizer. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. If you're good, you're good. So there are so many things we can say through sport. Now, I would like to open the floor if there are any questions or observations and the challenges you would like also to. Yes, sir. Your hand is raised up there, Peter. Thank you.
Are we there? There we are. Hello. My name's Peter. I'm from New York City, and I want to thank all the panelists who spoke. Hi, Victor, and all the folks who put this whole event together. In talking about sport and your challenges, sport definitely brings people together when we approach it with our own needs and the needs of helping others. Like Francesco, I was definitely not born an athlete and came to it much later in life. I'm still not much of an athlete, but I love to do sport, and I discovered cross-country skiing. And the first time someone asked me if I wanted to go cross-country skiing with other blind people, I said, "You must be nuts." And several years later, someone asked me the same question, and I couldn't wait to join. And to me, that shows a difference in the way my attitude toward blindness evolved and how most people also see blindness as why would blind people want to go cross-country skiing, or how could they? And, of course, what I learned in the interim is that, of course, we can, and we can enjoy it. And so I didn't start doing this till I was in my mid-40s, and I've done it for 20-some years, and I'm only 50, which is really amazing. So through cross-country skiing, I've skied with people of every age, both blind and sighted and wheelchair users, as guides and as fellow skiers. And I've skied with people from all over the world. There's a huge event in Norway every year called the Ritteren, where almost 1,000 people come from all over the world to cross-country ski. And it's and ski together as people with disabilities and as able-bodied people helping them.
Thank you. So there is the lady and then the gentleman next to the lady. Yes. Thank you.
Question is for Annika. Is that it?
Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Or one of you, or for yes. Sorry.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, my name is Rebecca Lindenbaum. I'm a friend of Francesco and very involved with Achilles. So 2 questions, actually. One is to Victor, but one is to you first. Where does your funding come from? And beyond the students who graduated college, are there any other people in the organization, or is it all like post-college? And to Victor, first of all, thank you for everything you do in New York City. That's incredible. What is your biggest challenge right now facing the disability community within New York City itself? I know that's a big question, so.
I'm sorry, could you remind me of the first question?
Your first question was about the funding for your organization
Yes.
and about the people who work there. It sounds like a bunch of post-grads. Very cool.
Yeah. So funding, we actually, so we're supported through UCF in terms of their board of directors, so they give us guidance in their leadership. But all of our fundraising actually comes from our own efforts and the assistance of their foundation to get donations from other corporations, foundations, partnerships, and then grassroots fundraisings for events like if we go to MegaCon and have a table and we have a bunch of people give us, $5 bills. So it's a pretty broad range, but a majority of it are those larger corporate and foundational donations. And then the second question, our team is comprised of all UCF students. So actually our UCF alumni are our leadership, but all of the actual team members besides that, so about 30 are actually undergraduate UCF students who are currently enrolled in the university. So it's all been just UCF students so far because we work with their career and career services to help integrate internship programs and their classes together to make a more holistic curriculum so that we can get different diverse team members on one platform to help the disability cause. So.
That's a big question. Well, we're such a big city, and we have close to 1 million people, 928,000 people that identify as a person with a disability in our city, and we know the number is bigger than that, so it's way over 1 million. So being able to provide accessibility on every level is tough because we have an infrastructure that was totally left people with disabilities behind, and now we're basically catching up. We got 30 years of the ADA, and people still aren't complying with accessibility. We, the city of New York, are keenly aware of the accessibility issues that are there, and we're playing catch-up. And playing catch-up to the accessibility issues isn't a good thing, right? We have to be proactive instead of reactive. And being proactive is everything that we put forward in Accessible NYC. And I think what's important, and which is a barrier too, is that people with disabilities are strong and they're loud and they're proud here in the city, and we like that. But sometimes we get into our little boxes, and people who are blind advocate for people who are blind. People who are deaf advocate for people who are deaf. People who have physical disabilities or wheelchair users advocate for wheelchair accessibility. And when we do that, we fracture who we are. And we need to really come together as a group and really represent those million people. So I think dealing with an aging infrastructure and, more importantly, getting the disabled community to act as one. And if you think of movements that have happened, especially in the LGBTQI movement, it's taking off, and they've come together and they've pushed efforts to come with the marriage equality. And those are great things, right? And the disabled community has come together. And I'm not saying they haven't. The ADA is certainly one of them. But there are so many issues that we can tackle together as a group, and I think that's important. And that's working side by side with city government and ensuring that they hold us accountable to be able to do that as well. So I know it's a pretty long answer, but in short, it's coming together as a community as one, and being proactive instead of reactive.
Yes, thank you, Vincenzo Pascale, NGO Migrantes. For several issues, I know some panelists here. You do, all of you, a great job. Daniela, thank you for putting together this great event. First of all, I want to congratulate the mission of Italy through the Council Schettino that announced that, well, the mission, the government allowed some funds for mentally challenged disabled people in Africa and Turkey, if I remember. And it's not really, what I have to say, it's not really a question, it's a sort of invitation. I see only here one corporation, Microsoft. I am an advocate for disabilities. My son is disabled. I am a great sportsman. I know Achilles very well. However, there is a very little knowledge among corporate America about disability. I don't want to get in detail. Last week I had a meeting with some top corporate lawyer in America, and they said, well, we don't hire disabled, really, right away. So I will really invite you to be advocate outside UN. In United Nations, we are very aware of this inclusion. This really promotes sport for peace, for everybody, but outside it's really tough, except for few corporations. That's why I'm really grateful to Microsoft. There are a few more, but please extend your network outside. Go to talk wherever you alumni association, wherever you can really bring the message to enhance your message outside the United Nations. Last but not least, a great praise to Inter. I'm a fan of Inter, and the Moratti family has been great in promoting Intercampus worldwide. So thank you again, all of you.
Thank you. I would like to ask Victor, actually, to give an answer or a suggestion to the question of Mr. Pascale, and also if anybody wants to intervene on the observations and question asked by the lady, though Victor answered, but there might be other panelists or anybody else in the room that would like to add something. Please.
Well, thank you for the question, or the statement for that matter. There are a lot of corporations or a lot of businesses that don't understand people. And really it comes down to employment. People with disabilities need to be seen and heard and seen. And when we're not employed, we have an issue. 79% of people from the working age of 18 to 64, people with disabilities, 16 to 64 are jobless. And that's an issue. So we need to be able to change that script. And people with disabilities need to be employed within these corporations. Mm-hmm. We, the City of New York, came up with an initiative called NYC at Work. It's a public-private partnership to employ people with disabilities. And we have lots of businesses that have come into our Business Development Council. And we have close to 100 businesses now. And in order for them to be part of us or part of this Business Development Council, we ask them to engage with us, tell us why they aren't hiring people with disabilities. And they've come up with lots of reasons why. A, we can't find the talent. HR usually stops us at the door. When we find a person with a disability, we're not sure how to provide for reasonable accommodation, and we don't know how to move them up to the next level. So what we do is, A, we find the talent for them because we have over 1,900 job seekers right now looking for work. And B, we come in and we train them. We train each company about what disability etiquette is. We teach them how to provide for reasonable accommodations. We work with their HR directors to break down those barriers into the workplace, because we need to change that script. And I'd have to say, within the last couple of years that we've been at this initiative, we've hired over 300 people with disabilities. And that will continue, both in the public and the private sector. But you're right. We need to be able to do that, and we need more initiatives like that to be able to train businesses, because once we start getting people with disabilities employed, then we really start breaking down the barriers. And full inclusive education is part of that script as well.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to close this wonderful day and meeting. Amazing panelists, good questions. And if you don't mind, I would like to ask the youngest person in this panel to close this beautiful day, the 3rd of December, while we have been celebrating persons with disabilities and the way they can empower and lead others for a better world. Thank you, Annika.
I just want to thank Daniela. Thank you so much for putting this panel together. This was great. I think we really did something today. I hope that this has made an impact. I just feel very blessed to be here today at my age for the second time, speaking about my story, not only to the nation now, but to the world. I don't know what else to say except for thank you.
Thank you.